It seems to be that the idea of eliminating a child prior to it being born doesn't seem to be, it may bother me a little bit, but I let people do that. But once that child is here, then the idea that we're not supposed to, we're supposed to reach out and take care of this child, but it's okay to kill it. But once it's here, isn't it horrible that you're not willing to feed it? Well, but if you kill it, then you don't have to feed it. And then you end up where so many of these things, if you read through them, and sometimes with the climate issues, there's a big part of this that has to do with population control, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Well, there's two issues here, Doug. I mean, one is the striking difference between reality and appearances. And of course, in the law, and not only in the law, but in philosophy, right? In any, certainly in the physical sciences, reality is what counts, not appearances, right? The sun may appear to be rising in the sky, but in point of fact, it is not. The Earth is rotating on its own axis and revolving around the sun. And that is the reality. Now, of course, if you're going to say, well, gosh, I mean, that preborn embryo is inside the mother's womb, and it's very small, and it's quite invisible unless I get an ultrasound or something. And therefore, by all appearances, it would seem to be not really a human being. Or once it's outside of the womb, it's really a human being based on appearances. That's just absolute baloney. I mean, that's just like saying, the sun is rising in the sky and really meaning that that's the reality, right? I mean, it's just such naive, criteria. What do we have to do then to overcome the problem of appearances, the subjectivity of appearances and the relativity of appearances? We have to develop objective criteria for determining reality. And what could be the objective criteria in this particular case? Number one, is it a living organism? You want to know whether it's human life or not? Is it living? Of course it's a living organism. Is it a human organism? Yes, it is a human organism. It's a human organism because it has the DNA of a human being and only will come out to be a human being with its mitochondrial DNA going back to the Eve gene, our ancestor, woman and common ancestor from 200,000 years ago. Yes, it's only going to be a human being, and it's a unique human being. The full human genome is as unique, more unique than your fingerprint. For all intents and purposes, there's not going to be any other one like it. And then if you're religious, of course you can't use this argument in the public square, but if you're religious, you say that being has immediately upon the full human genome, which will become, that full human being, God infuses a supernatural, self-reflective soul that's going to allow it to be transcendent. It's going to allow it to survive bodily death, allow this person to, this embryo to survive bodily death, and of course to be free and self-reflective and moral and empathetically loving. So for all intents and purposes, I mean, the reality is absolutely determinable. Why? We have DNA sequencers right now. There's no question that single-celled embryo is a human, unique human being, could be nothing other than a human being, and if allowed to develop without interference, will become a fully developed human being, manifesting all the dimensions of the soul that I just talked about. Right. So for all intents and purposes, I mean, the Catholics, are the ones that are trying to keep people, literally embedded in the real world. I think that the idea of using appearances as a way of judging things, is just, it's not just subjectivism, it's foolhardy. It can't do anything. It can't possibly be objective. It can't, you certainly can't build a bridge on it. You can't shoot a rocket at the moon on the basis of appearances. You better get some objective reality, not just in the sciences and in engineering, but in the political order as well, where lives are at stake. Culture is at stake. Family is at stake. We have to be able to do this. And of course, it is incumbent upon us as Catholics to, as they say, help people to get real again and to just move out of this domain of
thinking of what you just said strikes me in the sense of the idea of building your house on a rock versus building your house on sand. It seems like we've decided that the sandy beach looks better than the rock we're on, and we're building our house, as we see fit on this sand that just falls apart. But it looks good, but it doesn't sustain.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, appearances, they do shift. I mean, that's another huge problem. I mean, let's suppose, even just with respect to my subjective identity, part of my subjective identity, part of my identity is not subjective. It's objective, right? You have, your gender is objective, right? Your abilities, vis-a-vis your athleticism. Some people are going to have more, some people less. Some people are going to be more analytical, some less. Some people are going to be more literary, some less. Some are going to be more musical, some less.